Hi, everybody. So I already introduced myself, so I'm not going to do that again because I don't really like talking about myself. We're going to talk about other things. So today's training is called Write That Shit Down, okay? Because this is a pet peeve. This is a pet peeve. This maybe it's my earth coming out, but I want to take a second. If you are either hold a board position or run a project in your chapter, can you stand up? Any board position. I don't care whether this is local. No, I said run a project in your chapter. Stand up if you have a job, right? JC job, stand up. Okay. If you got hit by a bus tomorrow, could someone step in and finish your project or role? If so, sit down. Right? 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 And it's okay. Everybody can sit down right now. I say this, and I have no problem making fun of myself here right now, is that I know that both in JCI life, JC life chapter, my other role, and professionally, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, they would not know how to do what I do. Okay? And that's twofold, right? In some cases, I do have process documents, but they're not accessible. In other places, I don't have a process document. It is this wonderful thing called institutional knowledge, which is great to have, but it doesn't do you any good if it's not written down and it's not accessible. So beyond that, beyond getting hit by a bus, because that sounds very tragic, what are some other reasons why we need process documentation? Transition, onboarding? Yes. Uniformity and consistency. What else? Accountability. That's a great one. What's another big one? Haley? Yep. To make sure that you don't have to do it year after year after year. Yeah, that's a big one. Brandon? And I love that one. That's the other big one. Peter, did you have one that wasn't said? Yeah, says the lawyer in the back. I just have to say my company has 6 lawyers, none of which are partners. We just call all of them because we know ourselves. Right? But no, this is really, really important. One is the ability, as we said, to onboard, to be able to pass on, to make sure that you are not the only one who can do the project, right? And that's, I say about how I run, this year will be my second year chairing, although I've served on the committee for my chapter's has become our largest signature project. And some of you in this room have partnered with us on this. I have all sorts of documentation on my desktop, right? Like that's not super awesome for passing it on. And so this year we are trying to make an effort of both having a new member, which I'm very excited about, like brand new's only been a member for 2-3 months, shadow, but at the same time making sure that the documentation is provided and put in a more public place so that, worst comes to worst, if I get hit by a bus, somebody else can do it. And then also onboard somebody else. I also really like the idea of creating that consistency. For many of us, we talk about signature projects, right? What's a signature project? Right, something you do year after year after year. Our last presentation was on partnerships. If I am trying to get a partnership for a signature project, but that project looks substantially different every year, do you know how difficult it is to talk about what they can expect on that side of the partnership? How do I get, I want to pass it off. I don't want to be in charge of it anymore. How do I explain to a member what it is that they're doing? Right? And we see this, I see this. I've been here a very long time. I feel a little bit like, whoa, I've been a member for 14 years. How many times have we accepted a board position or a role and found out that's not what it's supposed to be at all? super fun. Remember that whole idea of expectations? What's an expectation? It can be really different or difficult. And then my favorite, because this is, as Vanessa said, my little earth hat, process allows for process improvement. How do you know where there was a breakdown if you don't know what the process is? And how do you not keep recreating that mistake? And this is a safe space to fail. We're allowed to make mistakes. In fact, I hope all of you make mistakes. We learn from mistakes. What is not helpful is making the same mistake year after year after year. So, why do people not? We talked about all these great things that process documentation does. Why do people not do it? Time. What else? It sucks. It sucks so hard. And I say that as an operations person, as an earth that loves process. I hate doing it. Right? My notes, my documentation are written in my shorthand. It makes sense to me, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to someone else. And it is like pulling fingernails to write it. However, we're going to talk about some tools that are going to make your life much easier. And there are some wonderful free tools. There are super advanced paid tools, depending on how much process documentation you have to do, but it doesn't have to suck that bad. It doesn't. Now, what types of processes do we need to document? Because I'm here to tell you, if you document everything that you do every single day for every piece of your role here, no one's going to read it. Timelines, partnerships, and what about partnerships? Contact information for partnerships, budget, meetings, goals. When we say meetings, what do we mean by meetings? Minutes. Yeah. Yep. Yes. And I like that because the why really becomes really important. Information for information's sake, if you don't have a goal for it, I'm going to tell you it's useless. Like it's not. If I have a list of members, but I don't know why I have a list of members, that's not useful information to me. But if I have a list of members and it is in the process that's because of follow-up or survey results or something like that does inform next year's event, it does become much more critical. Now, we've talked about it in terms of projects a little bit, but what are some other process documentation that you may need outside of projects? Elections, election rules. How do you not have to do that year after year after year? If you want to be president forever, don't have election rules. If you want to pass it on, figure that process out. Karina. Mm-hmm. Yep, onboarding, offboarding for roles for that. What's another big one? Yep. Treasure report. And I want to go farther on that. Beyond treasure report, what other key things? Budget. Taxes! If you want to be solvent, if you want to be a legal entity, you must file things. Bylaws, yes. Articles of incorporation. Bylaws, right? So there's a couple different categories of things that you need to think about when we talk about process documentation. And I like to put them in buckets. The first one are things that you need to be legal, right? And these, I want to say this too, because this has become a problem, is especially for many of our members who have joined post-COVID or something like in that time frame, those deadlines existed and were a little bit more malleable because the world was very different. It is starting to become more and more stringent back to the original calendar. And so if I was treasurer in 2020 and I said, you know what, they gave me an extension, we didn't have to file our paperwork until whatever, and we followed this process, I guarantee you that process is different, right? And so this is kind of keeping in the back of your mind. These documents are also living documents. You cannot always just use or go by what you had necessarily the year before, especially when it comes to legal documents. So what are some other things that we need to stay solvent? We said articles of incorporation. We need bylaws. 990, yes. I feel like at least in Michigan, we got some PTSD about 990s. right? What else? Bank account and an address, right? These are bare minimum legal documents. And for some of us, it's almost automatic. If we've had those roles, we know. But if I went to a new member, and at my table here, when we were talking about GMMs, there were at least 2 people that got made treasurer at their very first meeting, right? Right? And we're waving over here. So if you show up to your first meeting and you're treasurer and someone says do a 990, what are you going to do? After you stop crying, what are you going to do? A little bit, right? So we have these things that keep us solvent. Step 1, please be solvent. Like the rest of my advice does not matter if you are not a legal entity, right? Step 1. Step 2, we talked about this a little bit. This is what I consider operations, okay? They're not necessarily legal, but in order for things to keep going, we need to know, how many of us love, and this happened to me professionally. I took a job. I was a marketing communicator, or a marketing and communications coordinator for the campus health center. I'm going to tell kids how to, get their flu shot, right? Like campus health coordinator. Except students can't come. We don't see students, and we don't see certain faculty. And by the way, you don't have any, we have some social media accounts, but we have no strategy, and there's no onboarding, and there's nothing. I walked into an empty room and a desk, and they said, get started. I lasted in that job for less than a year. How many of you have taken a role and been like, okay, have fun? Right? There's way too many hands raised right now. You're all kind of giving me a little PTSD back here with those hand raises. Right? It is a moment. But we have obligations. You stand up. You decide that you're going to be a leader within your organization. We have 1 year to lead. If it takes you 4 months to figure out what it is you're supposed to be doing and what your job is, I'm sorry, a quarter of your year is already gone. That is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. It burns people out. That's why they choose to leave. And it makes it running your chapter just that much more difficult. So that second bucket I call operations. Those are things, as we said, Karina in the back, talking about what roles do you have on your board and what are the job duties. Now, I love this. Makes my little heart happy when it comes to job roles, because here's the thing. I'm a rule follower. I love rules. I do. But what rules are, what they factor in for me is expectations are fair. I operate completely from a sense of fairness. How do I hold you and make you accountable to something that you don't know that you signed up for? How do you know from a process improvement that all operations or all the things that you need to be a strong, healthy chapter are assigned to somebody, or that somebody is paying attention? Because I'm here to tell you, when it's everybody's job, it's nobody's job. Right? So that is a reason why we have different roles on our board, and this expectation walking in and saying, okay, now it doesn't need to be as specific as you need like a checklist. We love innovation. When we take a new role, we want to grow and make that role ourselves. But there are bare minimum expectations of that role that need to be communicated so that the person taking the role understands, and that you as a chapter know who to depend on and who to go to when you want something accomplished, you have a new idea. So those types of things, job duties, things like your budget. These are operational type of documents. Maybe a calendar of events that you've agreed to run. Remember, process documents are living documents. Just because on January 1st you said we're going to run these events does not mean that by, I don't even know what today is, July 20-something second, that's going to still look the same. But it exists. It's a starting point, and you're all on the same page. You're saving information. Have you... I'm going to use your all's example for a second here because that cracked me up. Stephanie this morning asked me if I had any resources for something that she needed. And she had apparently already asked somebody at JCI USA who had then told Gwen, who then told them to come talk to me. Right? We don't need to go through 8 steps to get something done because the right hand's not, right hand. I'm doing good. Right hand's not talking to the left hand. When we have process documents, something like a calendar, a budget, or something, you're a group of volunteers. This is not your day job. You have other things going on. I hope you have friends, you have family, you have responsibilities outside of this. If it takes you, weeks to get a piece of information to do your job effectively, that's problematic. So having a central location for something like a budget document that you know how much this project's supposed to cost you or what the project actually is that you can reference can make everything far more efficient. And I'm sorry, if I have to spend weeks looking for something, you've lost my interest and I have moved on. If I can't find it, I'm only going to look so hard because this is not my primary thing in my life. So there's all sorts of things that go in this bucket. That third bucket is I don't have a fancy title for it, but I call Make My Life Easier. Right? It's a good bucket. It's actually, in some cases, the most important bucket. Like I said before, if I have to look for weeks for a piece of information, I may give up. Now, I'm wearing a, board member hat. What if I was a general member? How long do you think I'm going to look for that key piece of information? Right. Yep. Yeah. Right. Well, and I love this because guess what? We all have different tolerances for that. I have a friend who refuses to look in his own email. He will just email me back. And I'm like, okay, your time saving wastes my time and I'm going to stop looking. But then there are others who will do a little bit more. But when we're talking about running events or other small things that involve, I imagine that there are chapter operations outside of projects. My chapter doesn't call socials projects. They're just things. But this type of information may be critical how many times, and I love this question, how many times have you spent time researching something and someone tells you, oh, that information was right over here? How many of you felt like burning the world down? Right? 100%. And that's what I consider the Make Your Life Easier bucket. There is, and this is both the wonderful thing about our organization and the worst thing about our organization, is that in the United States, we have 4 levels, right? You have the international, the national, the state, and then the local. And we really like communicating. And we communicate a lot. But we don't really make a difference in what we communicate in terms of what's important and what's nice to know. And so at a certain point, it's all noise, right? It's static. And then you start missing the critical pieces of things that you should know. And they can make your life easier. How many of you knew JCI has a new website? Because I told you, right? How many of you know that the senator application that's on jci.cc is incorrect because that's not our website? How many of you found out because you submitted a senator application that was last updated in 2003? Yeah. So, right? That new website transition has been going on for 2.5 years. This is part of a parent organization that we're all part of. We don't even know where to go to get critical information. That's bad process documentation. It's just difficult. And How many of us have had to search? I love this. In my chapter, every president for the last 5 presidents has asked me to pull up the new member oath every time we swear in a president or a member, because I keep it on my phone and they don't want to look for it. We don't have it somewhere easy. They would Google it, and then that takes too much time, and we're in a meeting, so they just ask me. Okay? The third bucket, make your life easier. Where can things easily be found and easily accessible for small things within that make chapters run and different? Okay? So you all have paper in front of you, and if you don't, Carol so nicely offered to give you more paper. I'm going to make you write stuff down because the title of this training is Write Shit Down. And if you don't write stuff down, I have failed. Ready? Got pens? I hear all the clicking. This is awesome. Because we're going to talk about tools that are going to make your life easier. Because I can sit here and tell you that this is important, and I can give you all the reasons why to do it. But like I said, it sucks. And if it continues to suck, you're not going to do it. Okay? Okay. Number 1, what you need is some sort of easily accessible database. No room. Noel has informed me that he will be giving advice, but is no longer responsible for things as of January. And so if your database is Mr. Noel, I hate to tell you, it's going to expire on you. You know, many people use Google. It's free, Google Drive. It's easy to be shared. I've Dropbox in some cases people use. I'm sure that there's technology out of there that creates a free database. And there are 2 things. 1, you have to make it accessible to all of the members in your chapter, and you can lock or restrict certain folders for your board only. So make certain links public, and you can have locked folders in there. Because as a public member, it's very hard. You don't want to add somebody every time they join in as a new member, add them, right, to give them the permission to the general stuff. But there are certain documents in that, especially in that third bucket of make your life easier, that don't need to be locked. They can be publicly accessible. So if you have a list of sponsors, that's fine. Or, you know, information about projects. Some chapters, right, new member orientation stuff. That assumes many of us have new member orientations, and if you don't, you should, and it should be in that third bucket. Helpful? Right? But figure out where you're going to put this information, how you're going to make it easily accessible, because like I said, the Activate stuff that's on my desktop, when Chris wants to look at it as a partner on this event, sorry, Chris, you can't see the survey data unless you go back through the 6 emails that I probably sent you. It might be there. Not findable. Pain. I shouldn't expect Chris to go through and look for an attachment for something that I sent. It could have been months ago. I don't really remember. I blacked out on what I sent last. So, but, right? You need to make it accessible. So figure out how you're going to do that. Google's just like low-hanging fruit. A lot of people do that. Next, you need to decide what it is that you're keeping track of. We talked about some of those documents that are important. So one thing that Redford does, and I love this as a chapter president, our 990, our Articles of Incorporation, our bylaws are all in one folder, and it says attach this to your chapter plan. I don't have to look for it. You fill out your chapter president, you fill out your chapter plan, you attach everything that's in that folder, and you hit go. Right? Make it easy. Right. And the wonderful thing is about digital documents is you can have more than one copy. You can have one in the folder that says attach this to your chapter plan, dummy, and you can have it also in something that says governance. Right? It's cross-listed, and I can find it. Okay, so decide how you're going to do it. Second is to decide the format. There are so many wonderful tools out there now for doing certain things, and some make sense and some don't, based on the type of information. Okay? How many of you have got past a document that's like 23 pages and you laughed yourself and closed the window? Yeah, I'm not reading an instruction booklet that's this long. I will control find a keyword of the information I need, something like that. We need to make the TLDR version. Okay? The TLDR version is so I just bought it in electronic. It's the quick start guide. It's the very basics. How do I turn it on? How do I make it do the most basic functions that I want? And go. No. Exactly. I had to explain to somebody what TLDR meant, so thank you. Make it easy. If I can't skim it and get key information, you've lost your audience. The same principles that apply to social media, if you don't catch their attention in like 12 seconds, it's not going to stick. And you want them to be usable. They're reference documents. Now, that does not mean that you don't need a longer explanation. And what I mean by this is, I have staff. Some of you know I have a business, I have staff. They have a contract. In the contract, it spells out their vacation days. It spells out employee benefits that we give them as a company, all of this. You know, they signed it. I hope that they read it before they signed it. If they didn't, ha 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 ha. No, my one staff hates the other duties as assigned, because whenever I ask her for help, and she's like, that's not my job. Like, other duties as assigned, Madison, I need you. But, right, it's a very long document. I have no expectations that they're going through and reading their contract for these types of questions. So I have a quick sheet made in Canva, right? Here are your vacation days, holidays that you get off, and it is a flyer. Why do you have to go to page 16 of your contract to find out what holidays our office is closed? And then there's a little asterisk that says, not limited to, because sometimes we just close the office and say, you have a vacation day, it's fine, we didn't feel like coming in. So do the TLDR version of their vacation days, or a graphic of benefits that they have available to them. Now, if they want to know the specifics of that particular benefit, they can then reference it back in their contract. But from a quick, easy guide, they can see everything. I shouldn't have to look at your bylaws to see how your board is made up. Do you have an org chart? Yeah, I saw everybody groan. The faces, I wish you could stand here and see what I see. Making me laugh, right? An org chart is a great example of a TLDR version of not reading, of not having to read, something like that. A calendar with your big signature events highlighted, right? You're going to have other events in between. But it's actually really helpful from a board member perspective. If you're doing your planning at the beginning of the year, you probably don't want all of your signature events in 2 months of the year, like this. That's how members can burn out. So maybe looking at it like a whole calendar and being like one here, one here, one here, one here, one per quarter, that makes sense. But it's hard to see that unless it's graphic, and it makes it much easier for your new members to be like, these are the big dates you need to know. We're going to have socials, we'll have smaller stuff in between, but these are the ones you need to know. And you can post it. Many of us have members-only pages. You can post it and pin it. Then they don't even have to go to the Google Drive, right? It's something that becomes referential at that point. Now, there's certain information that needs to be written. Budgets, bylaws, I do not recommend, and do not take this as a recommendation, that you should do your bylaws as a skit and video it. However, Frankenmuth all of a sudden has this video that they released. I apologize in advance from anybody from Frankenmuth. I did not say do your bylaws as a video. Okay? But there are certain things that lend themselves to not being written. Technical communication about how to follow a process and it's all written out is about the most boring thing in forever. If you're trying to tell somebody how to navigate a website and what things to click, it can be very, very difficult to communicate that in written words. But screen capture, So I love this. You can create a Zoom. This is the MacGyver sort of way. Most of you are too young to remember MacGyver, but this is the MacGyver way of doing it. If you don't want to spend money, is open a Zoom meeting, hit to yourself, share your screen, and hit record. That is a screen capture. And you can go to the Michigan LARA, Licensing and Regulatory Affairs website, and go through filing your articles of incorporation or file your 990 and then save the video. This is how you walk through submitting this to IRS. Because I'm going to say right here, and I say this, as a rules follower, sometimes those are terrifying. What if I did it wrong? What if it's my fault and we're not solvent? And is the IRS going to come and take all of our stuff? Which at the Redford JCs would be pretty funny because there's not much to take. But right, it can be very intimidating. But watching a quick video of somebody going, you click this button, and you click this button, and you click this button. And then you have a document next to it that says, the 990 is due on this date. Please, and then update it. Right? It's very easy. The other one, for things that you have to write things down, my favorite, and I say this, ChatGPT is amazing for becoming a template for a process or something else. I encourage my staff to use ChatGPT, and I warn them it will get you 70% of the way there. So if I say, ChatGPT, write me a process or a job description for let's just use job description because that's really easy. Write me a job description for a vice president of a nonprofit that focuses on individual development. It'll write you and format you a job description. And then you go through and you change it and you edit it to be specific for what your chapter needs or wants. It will save you. Like I said, it gets you 70% of the way there. Now you're spending 20 minutes editing something as opposed to the hour it would take you to write from nothing. Or for some of us who get anxiety about the white page syndrome, with just the blinking cursor, the 2 hours where it's blinking and then you go check Facebook and then you decide you're thirsty and I really can't focus until I get a snack and it never gets done. ChatGPT provides the outline, the basis for some of that. It can also write you processes on stuff. Write me a process for planning a large community event, plug and play. Now, there's also, I love, not reinventing the wheel. There are a multitude of templates available. Other JCI members have written you templates. The local organization guide has templates for things. JCI USA has templates for things. JCI has templates for things, and I'm sure JCI Michigan has templates for somewhere, right? Find those, adapt them, make them useful, and then save the template in that Google Drive so that someone else doesn't have to look for it after you're done. I have so many documents just named template that I can just copy and fill back in with information so I don't have to find it again. It can be crucial. Now, I'm going to say this here. I'm not 100% vouching for it, but I found this new thing. I'm going to share it all with you. It's called Scribe, scribe.com. Okay, I'm seeing nods. It's worth it? Okay, because I planned on downloading it on Monday and then forcing the rest of my company to use it because they're even worse at process documentation. I don't know. Some of you know them. They're terrible. So Scribe, what it does is it combines that video aspect with the AI or the chat. So you turn it on, you do a process, and it automatically is doing screen grabs and writing what it is you're doing next to the screen grab. There's a free version that works for all web stuff, and then you can pay per month, and it'll capture everything, not just web work. So at least that's what the pricing plan looked like, and I'm planning on paying the $12 because I need to, right? But that can be incredibly important. That's the connection of the in-between. Sometimes you have video. Sometimes there's the screenshots in the chat. It's also written. Now you've captured almost every way that a person enjoys information. Now, the little thumbtack I will say to all of this: information that exists but is not communicated might as well not exist. Okay? I'll say it again for those in the back. Information that is not communicated might as well not exist. So we need to make sure that we are communicating to our stakeholders. And I'll call stakeholders as this sort of all-inclusive umbrella: partners, members, other board members, sometimes even sharing information between different chapters. There is no reason why, I'm just going to pick on Chris because he's right here. There is no reason why Livonia should be like, we should be hiding project information or CPG. Many times we are collaborating on said project and we're learning from each other. So why not make our process documents that much easier? Yeah. I'd talk about it more if I filled them out ever. No, I'm just kidding. Right, that's a project planning guide. There's a template. This is something else. You can use one of these templates to fill out. You're not recreating the wheel. Follow the steps in it. It captures information and then save it someplace. Easy process documentation. May not always work. It may not have everything that you need to have in there, and that's where some of the other tools come in. But information, we here are all JCI members. If it is common, I have had requests from Minnesota members about some of the projects that we run and want to share the information. Why isn't it just something that's easily available that I can say, here's the link, you can find it there? This isn't proprietary information. We're not stealing from each other. If you can use someone else's process or information as that starting point, that benchmark, I want to know how Sarah and her chapter collaborated with 2 other local organizations in Muskegon to staff a project. I can ask for this, for that information. We can catch up and talk about it. But wouldn't it be great if I could just go and look and see and said, okay, how can I translate that to make sense in my community? We may not have the same groups, but I know. I love the cheers from downstairs. Like, it makes me, yeah, we can do that. Right? There is no reason why some of this why it should be secret, and that's why I say that there's 2 levels. Do you not want to broadcast your financial reports out into the public? No, you do not. Every treasurer here is like twitching, like absolutely not, right? That's why we have locked documents, but it needs to be available to your vice presidents, or in some cases maybe a project chair, so that they know there's an expectation of this much has been budgeted, don't go over. That's accessible information. So, sometimes we talk about process documentation. It sounds like about the most boring thing in the entire world. And Carol was like, can you talk about process documentation? And I was like, can my training just be do it? And she said, well, you have half an hour. Or an hour, you could, but I don't recommend it. So it's important. I will leave it. There are tools available that'll make your life easier. We all understand why it's important. The reasons why we don't do it is because it's hard, and it can be when you are in the whirlwind of all these other obligations that are going on. It can always seem like the thing that needs to be prioritized later and later and later. But you're kind of cutting your nose off to spite your face, because process documentation will make your life easier. It'll make it so the whirlwind is not as whirlwindy, is not as overwhelming. If it's easy, it's fast, you're not creating mistakes or problems for yourself. And at the end of the day, some cases, you just do it.